good to join you this morning.
I hope you can hear me clearly.
Yeah, I can hear you. Can you hear me?
I can hear you very clearly. Thank you so much.
Fantastic. It's good to be with you.
Great to have you. So, let's get into the issues. One of the major questions that Nigerians have been asking is that when we get local refining in Nigeria, prices will come down. Is that a fantasy or it speaks to reality?
So it's not so much of a fantasy. There is a case to make that refining locally will guarantee better pricing because that takes away the cost of shipping. It takes the cost, of duty when you're importing a commodity. It takes, of course, the cost of storage and things like that. And so you're likely to have better pricing when you produce locally. But that does not take into account the differential, the foreign exchange differential. And to your point about the local refining that we have now, which is the Dangote refinery, the problem is not so much that you have taken away the cost of shipping and duty and whatnot. The reason why the pump price of petrol is high is largely driven by the devaluation of our currency. You know that petroleum products are priced internationally and they are tied to the dollar. And so once your currency devalues or weakening against the dollar, what typically happens is that the price of that particular commodity goes up, just like you have with most other commodities that we import or that are priced in the dollar, right? So it's the same thing here. The value of our currency has lost close to 65% of its purchasing power in the last 1 year. And that has resulted to the devaluation of our currency, which inadvertently is driving the pump price of petrol upwards. So while people were right to have, looked forward to a local refinery that will guarantee them lower pricing to a very large extent, the problem now is that it is happening at a time where Naira has lost close to 65% of its purchasing value, and it's being so devalued against the dollar that is currently exchanging for about 1,700 Naira to a dollar. So simply put, if the value of our currency goes up today by 70%, you're likely to see a decline in the pump price of petrol by close to 70%, right? So the problem is a macroeconomic issue, and we have to fix that macroeconomic problem so that our currency can regain value, and that way we can start to push down the prices of petrol at the pumps.
Okay, so I got your point that the twin issues of currency devaluation as well as removal of subsidy push the price the way it is. But let me ask quickly before we go to the other issue. The issue around selling crude to Dangote in Naira, does it have any effect on pricing by whatever margin?
Well, so what that is supposed to do is to reduce the demand on foreign exchange, because he's still going to pay the exact value benchmark on the dollar. So, for instance, if you're paid, if for instance a barrel of crude is $70 and is expected to pay in Naira, so what Dangote is simply going to do is you're going to exchange $70 times 1,700 Naira, and he's just simply going to pay the Naira equivalent. And so he's still paying in terms of cost almost the same thing. The only difference is that he does not need to source dollars to be able to pay for the crude. So what that simply does to a very large extent is that it reduces the pressure on foreign exchange or forex. And secondly, and this is what we expect to happen, we expect that the Naira value is pegged so that it insulates that arrangement from the constant volatility of the prices going up and down consistently, right? So in terms of cost savings, it doesn't do so much because you're still paying, the Naira equivalent of what should have amounted if you were paying in dollar. But now, in this case, you don't need to source for the dollars, to be able to pay in hard currency, really and truly. And if it was pegged, which means that you don't have to pay different money today and pay different money tomorrow, it helps insulate it from volatility. So that is essentially what it does.
Okay.
It would not necessarily translate to significant lower pricing.
Okay. So people now will ask that what are we gaining from the advent of Dangote refinery, refining locally on our soil beyond availability?
I mean, that's a very good question, right? And I'll say that you typically should gain three things. And like you said, you have touched on availability. The second, obviously, is energy security, right? The fact that you can, as a country, determine your energy supply locally and not have to depend on foreign refiners to be able to power productivity locally. The third, of course, is that 40% of our foreign exchange exposure is tied to the importation of petrol. And you know that exposure is also primarily responsible partly for the devaluation of our currency. So in earnest, what the refinery is doing for us is to save us that level of exposure and help us build our foreign reserves to the extent that our currency can also begin to gain significant value. Another important thing that it does, aside the fact that it creates huge amount of high-paying jobs locally for all sorts of geologists, chemical scientists, and all of that. Of course, the refinery is poised to employ over 20,000 people. Is that it's also going to drive and stimulate, the local economy. Suppliers to the, suppliers, all sorts of vendors that are going to be doing business with the refinery that will be tied to billions of dollars yearly, which will have a significant impact, on our economy. And also the fact that the refinery is also going to be producing several derivatives, for instance, polypropylene, that is going to be feedstock, to other manufacturers across the country, that is in terms of plastic and things like that, which will save many manufacturers from the cost of importation, and of course the cost of seeking forex to be able to import some of these feedstock that they need, in their factories, to manufacture locally. So, I mean, we can go on and see the several benefits, of this refinery, but ultimately, it's about the fact that it will help stimulate the local economy. It will save us foreign exchange exposure. It will create meaningful jobs. It will guarantee energy security and availability. And of course, it is also driving local productivity. So these are the things that it's poised to do. But we also have to keep in mind, and it's important to consistently stress this, that it's also a private enterprise, right? Where, they have to do their jobs to also maximize shareholder value and turn profits for their investors and pay off their obligations. And it's not a charity, really and truly. They are in to make money and they are in to make profit. The difference here is that it ties with the long-term energy goals, of our country as a nation. And that's why it was championed by the previous administration. And that's why